In my introduction, I talk about this pervasive idea that life is about arriving at some point in the future, that we tend to think that we'll be happy and fulfilled and content when we get the job, the relationship, the house, whatever it may be. And I think as a result, you see people rushing and in this desperate quest to get from this moment to some future moment, thus missing out on the mundane, miraculous nature of life. And my sense is from reading your stuff that resonates with your view of things and your outlook. And I wondered to what degree that's true.
Well, I think it's 100% true. All we have is now. And if that now is filled with fantasies about some future attainment, then we don't experience what's right in front of us on the table where it always is. We're living our life into the future. And we find out as we age that the future is not all that beautiful. And eventually the future is usually horrible. That's what the Buddha taught all these thousands of years ago. Old age, illness, and death is what he called it. So that's what we have to look forward to. So we need to go for the gusto when we still can. And if we get in the habit of always imagining some future attainment, and then I will be happy, then I will feel peaceful, then I will be calm and fulfilled, or whatever the fantasy is, then we don't notice that we may be feeling that way right now if we only gave it a chance.
I love that. I love that. That's so interesting. Okay, that's got me thinking already. And this really came home to me because I was looking around and it's a big station. The station had changed. There were birds flying around. There's all this variety of humanity there. And actually, if you stopped and had a look at it, it was actually quite a remarkable scene. But literally, as I look around, 99.999% of people were completely oblivious to that fact and were just desperate to find out their platform. And it was quite shocking to me that how deeply entrenched this is. So I wondered why you think this is the case. Why do we live for the future and overlook now so pervasively?
Well, I don't really know if there is a why. This seems to be the human condition, that we are not happy. We are always searching for something that we imagine will be better than this, but it's always this. So it's either you see this as it is, or you have some fantasy about how it could be improved. And it's really like an on and off switch. I mean, speaking personally, for many years now, I have no future at all. The present is the entire thing. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that I might not make a plan for next Thursday or some kind of financial decision or whatever that has to be made in advance. We do have to live an ordinary life, but on the level of perceptions, feelings, and thoughts, those are always arising. And if we see them, we may understand that this is life. Whatever you do moment by moment will be your life. Not what you imagine will happen in the future. That never comes to pass. That's just a fantasy game that we play with ourselves. It's what I call a hypnotic trance. And, you ask the why. We were put into that trance as children by the culture around us. In one of our chats, you mentioned a beautiful thing about your infant daughter and how present she was and just living for the moment. Well, the culture conspires to remove us from that state. And to some extent, it's necessary. We can't be infantile all our lives. We do have to be adults. But we can also be childish adults. And I know you've interviewed a lot of great sportsmen. And one of the great things about sports, I've been into sports, a lot of them. And one of the great things about it is that when you're playing golf, let's say, which is something I always love, you'll find that you're just smiling and you don't really know why. It's like being a child again. You're just hitting a ball. It's beautiful. And you might have other things on your mind, but for that time when you're just striking the ball, you're free. And I think a lot of the seeking and searching that goes on in the name of self-improvement is really only desire to be free in that way, at least for part of the day.
Yeah. So just talk to me a little bit about the comment you said earlier about if we accept this is it, then the very peace and happiness and well-being that we believe will come along in the future, we may notice that it's actually here now.
Yes, exactly. That doesn't mean that we don't have difficult feelings. We all do. Life is not easy. If you really look at it, it's pretty hard in many ways. We have to earn a living. There's all kinds of illness and physical problems. There's threats from the outside. Then there's the whole weight of tradition that we carry around, a bunch of beliefs that we were forced to adopt in order to get along, and all that's there. We're carrying it around like a very heavy weight. All of that is there. And when someone is awake, as I call it, it's not that that goes away. It doesn't go away. Where could you put it? It's not like there's some trash can where you just get to throw all that away and now it's gone. Garbage disposal. It's not like that. So the awake people that I know are fully adult. They are aware of the difficulties in life and the threats to our well-being and all of that. They're not happy idiots, but they understand that this is all we've got. So make the best of it. You might as well dance. We're at the party. It's a very expensive ticket to get in, a very expensive ticket filled with suffering and grief and loss. So the wise among us say, okay, I'm in the theater now. I've already paid the price of admission when I was born. So while I'm here, I may as well enjoy the show.
Yeah. That rings true with my view of things, which is that I spent a long time on this quest to, shall we say, fix myself. It's that whole self-improvement thing. I had anxieties and this sense of being a bit broken and whatever else. And so I went off and did a multitude of things, psychotherapy, and we can touch on your past as a psychotherapist, to psychedelics, to all sorts of stuff, until eventually I came to that realization that actually there wasn't anything wrong, really. It was all to some degree in my mind. That doesn't mean, for example, that I don't still experience anxiety or have these difficult moments, but behind that, there seems to be this quiet sense of awe and joy and appreciation for it all, even when I'm having a bit of an anxious meltdown or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be my experience. And so this quest to, for example, fix myself definitely has gone. So I wonder, does that sort of sound like it resonates with what you're talking about there or not?
Well, I think that people will be engaged in self-improvement until they aren't. There's not a shortcut. I mean, you mentioned I did psychotherapy, and people often come to psychotherapy wanting to get better. I mean, that's the idea. I'm hurting now. I'll go to the therapist and I'll learn to be okay. And what really happens is you understand that there is no final place where you're okay. What it really is that you're coping with life moment by moment. And it's like any other sport. If you take a certain attitude towards it, win or lose, you're in the game. And as you were pointing out, it's the game, not winning and losing. The best players know that they will win some and lose some. And that allows them to just be free and participate without worrying about the outcome. I've known some amazing athletes in my time. I once found myself in the hot springs with this star American football player, Dwayne Thomas. Dwayne just died in August, so I thought about this. I hadn't thought about it for years. This was 40 years ago, 50 years ago, whenever. And we were talking about this very, very subject. And he expressed this idea that he doesn't try to be successful. He just plays the game. He doesn't worry about whether he's going to score a touchdown or he'll get tackled. He just runs, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
That seems simple-minded, but it's really a good attitude.
Absolutely. Yeah. Was it Yogi Berra said something along the similar lines? Funnily enough, a listener to my podcast and who's also read my book texted me a voice note last night about how he'd been quite a good sportsman, but had suffered a couple of difficult disappointments growing up, one in football and one in tennis. And so he'd avoided various competitions. And then he read my book, and I'm not taking credit for it, but that did precede it. And I speak a lot about not identifying with, much like what you said there, just seeing what happens. Like the game is its own reward. So he went in with this attitude. He entered a golf tournament. And he texted me last night to say that his only aim was to enjoy himself, was to enjoy the game itself. And lo and behold, he went and blooming won. And I think that's the irony, isn't it? There's this idea that it's the trying and the person who wants it more, that is the one who's going to come out on top. Actually, it seems to be the person who can let go of all that stuff and just go moment by moment and see what comes up and be okay with whatever comes up. That is the state in which things are more likely to happen.
Well, of course, relaxation improves performance. When we're not tight and bound up, that's when we can really move. Whatever the action is, it could be sports or anything else. When we don't have this performance anxiety, that's when we're at our best.
Yeah. So, just in terms of your life, then, Robert. So, so you were an artist, a photographer, a dashing young man. Still are dashing, but perhaps not quite as young. And but then you said
not quite as dashing either. not nearly. Anybody who wants me to dash will be disappointed.
But you said you had this sort of awakening experience, and part of it happened in a dream. So would you mind just sort of sharing a bit what this was and how it changed you and the insights you got from this?
Oh, I've told this story so many times. It well, I will. I was about to try to avoid telling the story, but I just will. I I had been reading a lot of Buddhist material, and I had this idea of awakening and the ego and all these things that spiritual people think about. But I wasn't deadly serious about it. You mentioned that before. It's not that I had my nose to the grindstone and expected to be enlightened overnight or anything. It wasn't like that. But had an interest. And at that time, I was a photographer and had a pretty good art career going. I had New York exhibitions and good reviews, and I had collectors and museum shows and stuff like that. So I was making it in that world a bit. Well, I had a dream, and in this dream, I was rowing in a boat away from a headland, but I didn't know it was there. I felt it behind me, but I had this need to turn around. And when I did, I saw this immense moldering structure. It was just coming apart. It was on there. It was like a hotel with 1,000 rooms. And it had a system of buttresses and supports that was holding the whole thing together. And it wasn't, it was an amazing experience because I was somewhat conscious while this dream was going on and had the idea that's the ego and I'm leaving it behind. And of course, the next morning when I awakened, it hadn't been left behind. I was still Robert. But uh, about a year later, or maybe less, I was sitting in my pickup truck on the edge of the Rio Grande Gorge. This was in Taos, New Mexico, a really beautiful place. And there's this deep gorge, like the Grand Canyon, but not as large. And I was just sitting there, not meditating, just looking at it. And there was a sudden change in everything. And I can't describe this. Words are inadequate. Um, it will sound mundane, but the experience was this is all here, and I'm not making it be here, and I'm not making myself be here. No one is doing this. And that sounds ordinary, but it was mind blowing. Well, I made it home, and a few hours later, my wife came home and found me sitting naked on the kitchen floor laughing. And she said, "What's going on here?" I tried to tell her, but I couldn't. And this lasted for a couple of days. I was in an altered state for maybe a couple of days. And after that, I did everything I could to try to um, take it in and understand what the experience had been. And it took a while. It took a few years actually for me to understand this is what awakening is. This is what all these people in the past who described Satori or whatever you want to call it, this is what they meant. Well, you mentioned doubt before, and I had a lot of doubt about that. Who am I? I'm just an ordinary person. How can I have this experience? And maybe I'm just narcissistic, and this is just an ego trip. And I went through this. It took, I don't know, a few years, and then finally I admitted to myself, this happened to you, just like all these great people in the past. You're awake. Amazing, Robert. And there was this temptation to begin talking about this. Fortunately, I didn't. And that's when I changed to my profession from photography to psychotherapy. And instead of becoming a spiritual teacher, which is usually a strange profession, I think, very strange, I just use this understanding in my therapy work without ever referring to it or speaking about it or encouraging anyone else to have that experience because I don't think that's effective. But I retired from psychotherapy and then I felt free to discuss this kind of thing with people who are interested. And that's what I've been doing. That's how my books got written. And I intended to speak for a minute and I've gone on, but that's the story.
When you say about this crumbling of the ego, what was the change? What was the shift?
You're not at the center of anything. The world is here and you're in it, and so is everyone else and everything else. And there's no strong focus on what do I get out of this and how can I profit and when will I be happy and all these questions that hurt people so much. They go away and you're just content to be here. Even when you're in bad pain or you're worried, there's still this sense that of being. There's a sense of being that's underneath it all. And that's what's in the foreground. And whatever the conditions are, you just deal with it step by step. And that's what we have to do as human animals. We have to just survive and live. And it's perfectly okay. Whatever you need to do, it's fine. You have to do that. But you don't feel I'm in the center of this and important and everything that happens to me is of the utmost importance. That goes away.
Yes. So we do tend to view the world very much through the prism of me. What does this mean for me? What do people think of me?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to do? How's my future going to show up? Etc. Etc. It's just that seems to be the story, the narrative that everyone has pretty much 90% of the time going on between the years. So was it a big reduction in that kind of experience? Yeah,
Tremendous reduction in that experience. I won't say that it's entirely gone. I mean, I do have a sense of needing to keep my affairs in order. But we were talking about sports before. To continue with that metaphor, I'm playing the game, but I'm not concerned about the outcome at all. It will be what it is. I'm not in control of that. I just do the best I can moment by moment, but I don't think, will I win or lose? It wouldn't occur to me. I have no way of knowing that. And eventually we all lose. And we lose really badly. And see, this is something that's constantly denied, especially in this spiritual community of which I'm a pretty harsh critic. These people imagine that they're actually going to attain this state of freedom and nothing bad will ever happen. And that's not true. If we look at the people older than us and see the condition they're in when they're my age and older, and they have their ailments and diseases and they're coming apart and they're going to die. Nobody wants to be in that situation, but everybody will be. Most people will be. And so, where's the victory? There isn't. You have to play the game. There's no way to win this game, in my view, in my opinion. You understand. I understand. I can't win, but I'm going to play this game while I'm here and not fill my mind with escapist ideas about how it all comes out great in the end.
And so keeping in mind this recognition that we're going to die and probably suffer pretty badly beforehand, does that mean that the mundane experience of now, just a short walk across my lawn or whatever it might be, looking up at the sky, is that much richer because of the awareness that you have around the losing nature of the game?
Simon, I cannot even express to you how much richer it is when you realize in this moment, all these bad things that must occur sooner or later are not occurring. How rich that is. See, like speaking to you now, this is the greatest. I'm not in pain, and I have been in serious pain. I have no appointment with the doctor later today to find out what's wrong. The hordes are not beating down my door. I'm just here, and it's beautiful. A lot of people are always seeking happiness, and I think it's a wrong focus. Peace is much better than happiness. Then happiness can occur, and when it does, you enjoy it. It's like a wind in the trees. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. But if you're peaceful, you notice when you're happy. And when you're not happy, you don't wish that you were. You don't say, I wish I could. I was happy last week. When that girl smiled at me, it made me so happy. When you're old like me and a girl smiles at you, it's wonderful. you, you, it really is. You mentioned a dashing young Robert, but he's gone. But every now and then, some sweet young thing will notice the few remains of that dashing Robert and kind of, wow, this is great. And so if that happened to me yesterday, I won't walk around today wishing that it would happen again. I'll be in what is now, and I'll be peaceful and not expecting the next thing to make me happy. This is so simple, but it's hard to express in words. It really is.
So that piece, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I understand what you mean, and I think this is increasingly become my experience too, is being okay with whatever happens to be happening, because life is this stream of one bloody thing after another, as Winston Churchill put it. But if you can be in line with that, then you can be at peace during that.
I love that Churchill quote. I think the way I heard it is history is one damn thing after another. This is brilliant, right? Yes. Well, that's it. That's it right there. He had his finger on the pulse. Shit happens and it keeps happening. And the wise among us understand that in advance going in. And you just swallow your life. You chew it up and swallow it bite by bite. Sometimes it tastes good, sometimes it doesn't, but you have to keep swallowing it. What's the alternative? See, the alternative is to escape and be in this hypnotic trance. And that is culture. Culture wants you in the hypnotic trance. They don't want free. The culture at large can't use liberated people. They don't serve any purpose. They're not always striving. You can't tempt them with riches and fame and all that. They don't care. They don't need it. So the rest of us are programmed to attain, always be attaining, always get the next thing, always onward and upward. And that is when you become robotic and you're escaping into these fantasies of attainment.
In terms of someone then who is, let's say, who is suffering, and you've faced a lot of suffering as a psychotherapist, but particularly so, for example, let's say with depression or anxiety, and I've had my fair bout of anxiety and I've still got a sensitive nervous system. How can this swallowing your life and recognizing that, you're never going to be completely free of the um of what we, well, free of everything that we want to be free of. How can what we're talking about here, how can that help someone who is really in the pits of depression or really in the pits of suffering, do you think?
Well, psychotherapy is a healing modality. You don't tell the truth in therapy. You try to alleviate suffering if the suffering is that intense. Maybe restore that person to a condition where then you could speak this way. But I wouldn't take a depressed person and say, don't worry, you're going to die someday. It'll all be over in the end. I mean, that's not really helpful. So, I mean, you have to meet each client on the ground that of their own being, not of my being as a therapist. It's not about Robert when I'm a therapist. So I can't really generalize. But and depression is very difficult to deal with talk therapy. Usually these days they resort to the chemicals quickly.
Was there a common belief that underpinned a lot of the suffering that you noticed or anything like that?
Well, I see it's tempting now to say, well, we all suffer because some of the people you've interviewed talk that way. If only you could understand this one thing, you'd be cool for the rest of your life. There'd be no more suffering. It's so simple. We're not actually people. We don't really exist. So how can we be suffering? And see, I don't see it that way. I see that we're human animals, and dogs and cats suffer emotionally also. It's not just us humans, and they don't have any ideas in their mind. So it's not a question of taking the bad ideas out and putting God or something in there, and that'll fix everything. You can't do that to a dog, but a dog will still suffer. Dog will suffer terribly, emotionally. And we're like dogs, just more evolved. So we're going to suffer. And I think what the therapist learns is everyone is suffering. Me too. The therapist is suffering and the clients are suffering. So what I'm talking about is not ridding oneself of suffering. What I'm talking about is when I suffer, and I do, I understand there's the only alternative is some kind of escapist movement, and I'm not willing to spend my life escaping. Going back to Alan Watts said, when you dance, when they're playing music and you dance, you know this one. He says, you don't dance to arrive at some particular place on the floor. You just dance. And he said, what if life was a musical thing and you were supposed to dance? And that's my point. I think Alan had it right. You can dance when you're suffering. You must dance when you're suffering, and it will be a suffering dance. And you might say, oh my God, this is awful. And it might be. But what's the alternative? The alternative is escapism, either through suicide, which is valid, but I don't recommend it unless it's totally necessary. I think it was Sartre who said the only real philosophical question is whether to commit suicide or not. And in a way, that sounds a bit strange, but if you really ponder it, it's really a good question, because what it does is put you back into the idea that you have to live. If you're alive, live and suffer. And I do suffer, but not emotionally. That's over. That's really over. I don't mean that I don't feel sad or get the blues, but there's a sense that all of that is happening not just to Robert; it's happening to humanity. This is who we are. This is what we got.
Yeah, it's part of the game. It's an inevitable part of the game.
It certainly is. It's just like standing there on the tee with your driver and hooking one into the hazard on the left, and now you've got 2 penalty strokes. Oh my God.
So there is such a pervasive interest in, for example, self-development or positive thinking, these kind of things, or putting very successful people on a pedestal and having the biggest house or whatever it may be. And so many of us get caught up in that. And so what do you think of how to not fall into that trap, as it were?
How to not fall into the trap? I don't know. I mean, if you're going to fall into it, you will fall into it. But you mentioned this obsession with self-improvement, and I think that's the underlying theme that we're discussing here. It's either focus on the future or be here now. And I don't think anyone really can choose one or the other. I think you just have to keep seeking until you don't seek anymore. What makes that happen, I don't know. I really don't. That's why I'm not a spiritual teacher. If I had those answers, I would. I publish them, but I don't know. I don't know how to get someone off that trip.
It is interesting in my experience as someone who's been a very strident seeker, that actually it was all that seeking was required to, at least to some degree, realize that it's fruitless. So it's that old saying of, a seeker can't find, but if you don't seek, you won't find. So to me, that's been, the seeking was a necessary prerequisite to realize that actually there was nothing really wrong all along, and that's just the way things are. I wonder what you think of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. You're just if you need to get on that path of self-improvement, you'll just be on it until you aren't anymore. And I don't know what it takes for you. I don't even know what it would take for me. I mean, these. I guess I might as well say it. See, all of this is just mysterious. There are
Yeah.
no answers. I don't. In my view, there are no answers to these questions that you're asking. They have no answers. It's just an experience. Life is only an experience. It's not a puzzle. It's not a detective story where we get the answer. This is something to be experienced.
Yeah. Which is beautiful.
Well, it certainly can be. If you've ever made love in a hammock, I mean, come on.
But that's, I think, the thing about life, isn't it? Is that you can't have the high without the low. You can't have the good without the bad. And I think that's quite an important recognition. And then, as you say, I think coming to terms with that, then this background piece can seem to be there through it all, and the highs stop being perhaps so high, and the lows stop being perhaps so low.
Yeah, I don't know about any of that, honestly. I mean, you say you can't have the good without the bad. I think that's true because you wouldn't even know something was good unless you, I mean, but that doesn't really explain anything. It doesn't even give you a clue. I mean, okay, let's say something really bad happens and you find yourself in the hospital lying on a bed in pain, staring at the ceiling. It would be very hard to say to yourself at that point, this is all great because now I'll know what good really is when this is over. I
Yeah.
don't think that's really the experience. It's not my experience. I've been in that situation, and my experience was not that. My experience was, you're just going to have to get through this, boy.
Well, absolutely. But I think that's kind of my point, is that this stuff's going to happen, and if you rail against it and are of the view this shouldn't be happening, then you're multiplying the suffering many times, as opposed to, well, this is happening and this is the way things are. Doesn't mean I'm going to like it, but it also doesn't mean I'm going to curse life and anything else and say this shouldn't be happening to me. Well, why not?
Yeah. Well, earlier when you were asking me about the experience of being awake and what is that like, when when I'm suffering personally, I understand this is not just my problem. This is everyone's problem. I'm a human being. This is what I was born into. Everyone else is also. If someone is now not in the hospital lying on his back in pain, he or she will be sooner or later or in some other dire circumstance and have to deal with it. So it's not why me? Why is this happening to me? Of course it's happening to me. I'm human. When you're a human, bad things happen and good things happen. I mean, imagine being in Gaza right now,
Yeah.
just waking up in the morning in a place like that. It's unspeakable. It's just horrible. And when I look at it, I understand that I could be in that situation also. I'm just lucky that I'm not. And it's nothing great that I've done or accomplished that keeps me from being in that situation. It's just lucky to be born in not in that place, but in a better place, a better
Yeah.
country. Just fortunate.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. And I've heard you say this before. And I once said this in a talk as well. I was invited to give a talk where I was expanding on some of the themes in my book. And someone asked me a question at the end. And I said, well, look, it's all luck in the end, which somewhat contradicted some of the things I'd said earlier. But what I was meaning was, I haven't chosen the way I look. I haven't chosen the time that I was born. I haven't chosen my skills or talents or nothing. And it's all a result of just this infinite number of occurrences and stuff. And so to take too much credit, or to take really any credit for what we achieve in our life, or to damn ourselves for what we achieve, and therefore to judge other people as well, it seems pretty bonkers, and I've definitely been on a table or two in my time at weddings or whatever, where people there, and you can see that they're patting themselves on the back for everything they've achieved, completely oblivious to how it's just been a complete stroke of fortune if you really boil things down.
Totally agree. That's a very good statement you've just made. That's actually very good information. It's vital. You didn't choose the historical era into which you were born. You did not choose your parents. You didn't choose your body, your brain. You didn't choose the little kids you went to kindergarten with. You chose none of it. And if if you were born with a reasonably pleasant face and a body that works well and all your senses in a place where people loved you and fed you and supported you and educated you, you didn't do any of that. It's all luck. It's 100% luck. All of it. Being here right now is all luck. It really is. And awakening is luck. I didn't do anything to deserve that. It just happened.
Mm.
And I'm
Yeah.
grateful for it, but I don't take credit for it. I don't say, now I'm this enlightened master. You come here and kiss my feet and I will bestow my. I mean, you see, it's a giant ego trip. It's horrible. And that's my critique of spirituality. It's none of it's good. None of it. I don't mean that some of the ideas that are spoken about are not good. There is a perennial wisdom, but the perennial wisdom is not coming out of the mouths of the teachers. You have to go back into the books and read that for yourself, because the teachers are 90% of them or more are just making a living at it. That's their game. That's their shtick. And they can't express any doubt, because if they did, they would lose their clients. They have to be internet influencers, but call it spirituality or call it enlightenment.
But I do have this sense of just being alive, and that is always present and always there. And I do feel like that, even becoming aware of that and becoming aware of the fact that I am aware, that to me has been something that has been quite it's given me some peace and a place of refuge, if you like, that's always available. I wonder if that
Mhm.
rings true with you at all.
100%. 100%. This feeling of aliveness is something that we don't have to doubt. It's
Yeah.
palpable. It's evident. It's self-evident that one is alive. That there's no denying that. Whatever we think the ultimate source of that is, or whatever, that's a different conversation. But the fact is, you wake up in the morning and you are a living animal. There's no way around it. I mean, you're alive. You need to pee. You need food. You breathe. That can't be denied. That's not an illusion. Or well, someone could argue that it's an illusion, that you're only dreaming that you're an animal. But that's a strange idea, because I think it's palpable that we're alive, and that when someone isn't alive, then we call that a corpse, not a person.
But that sense of aliveness, it's easy to um overlook and not, I think, recognize the miraculousness of that. And that's when we perhaps start looking for the Ferrari or the big house and overlook this. Oh my Lord, there's this sense of being alive and this sense of
Yeah.
being a perceiving, living
Hmm.
thing, as it were.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is that's to me is where the real, I can catch myself at any moment and be like, wow, that's the really cool thing. Not the I'll be okay in the future, the big house, the whatever
Hmm.
else. Just the simple fact of being alive and aware at the same time. That to me that's always available and is always remarkable. But it's so easy to overlook.
Well, so you're very fortunate to have arrived at that. That's already pretty rare.
Yeah.
You're fortunate, and you've suffered to arrive at that awareness. Clearly, you said you went through a lot of things. Psychotherapy is no fun. All the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the achievement thing, is mental illness. It's narcissism, narcissistic. I want that Ferrari because then people will know I'm the man. I got a Ferrari, not a Ford. And it's a desire. It's a need to be admired, and it's very shallow. I mean, experience is, as you're pointing out, experience is so wonderful and varied and large. Do I really need admiration to be part of that? I don't think so. When I've looked into it personally, I, I don't think I require admiration. What I seem to require psychologically to be okay is a feeling of competence. Personally, to feel I'm good at this. Not that people say, Robert, you're such a great photographer. No, that's not really important. The important thing is that when I have a camera in my hand, I feel I can do something with this. I'm competent. I think that's much more. And see, the admiration thing is a poor substitute for that feeling of competence. If I want
Yeah.
other people to tell me you're competent all the time, that's a strength. Then it means I doubt it. I don't have that feeling.
Hmm. We do tend to put people on a bit of a pedestal who are the great achievers and who are the great strivers, and sort of think of them as special people. And I think that can be a bit of a dangerous or even damaging
Hmm.
myth.
I don't
I
think I
wonder
have.
if you,
I don't think I have a shred of that. I don't see people that way at all. I
no,
see.
no, I don't either.
I
It's an
see.
illusion.
I see them psychologically. I see all of us psychologically. I see all of us having to cohere. The first commandment in psychology is thou must cohere as a self, whatever it takes. If it takes money and fame, if that's what I really need to not completely decompensate and end up nuts, okay, I'll have to get those things. And maybe you do need those things. Who am I to judge? I mean, I can't. But whatever it takes to cohere emotionally, psychologically, we're going to pursue it. We must feel like a self. We must feel like myself. The thing that I've experienced is a lot of that can go out the window and you'll still be here. Maybe all of it can go out the window and you'll still be here. I don't know about that, but conceivable. But a lot of it can go out the window and I'm okay. Just sitting here, no big emergency, nothing nothing horrible is happening. And when I don't have a Ferrari, okay.
Yeah. Okay, just to sort of wrap up, as it were, I think that's definitely been my experience, and I've really enjoyed talking to you about this. Is that I think the more you recognize just the perhaps the nature of life in terms of its up and down nature and one bloody thing after another, but also the miracle of existence, why there is something and not nothing, then in my experience, I still worry about money or whatever it might be. But at the same time, I definitely don't need as much, like it doesn't take much for me to be pretty content. As long as I've got a food and house, and it's what I've noticed is the mundanity of life has become so much more miraculous than it ever used to be. That's something I think is very valuable.
Well, I think you and I agree on that point, that just the ordinariness is wonderful. And of course, you need money. Everybody does. That's the world. I mean, and there'll be anxieties around that unless you're just miraculously wealthy. And even some of those people are afraid they'll lose it. So they've got the money anxiety also. But yeah, we need things in the material world. And that's, as I said earlier, life can be difficult. And that's one of the difficulties, that we would like to be 18 months old and have parents that held us and loved us and took care of everything. But we don't, that's a small window. And soon the world will be saying you have to grow up. And that's true. But we don't have to be fully adult. We can still maintain the innocence of a child while being competent adults. We can still, I think I'm manifesting that, to tell you the truth. I have an essential innocence. Other people have pointed that out to me. That it's I'm not naive. I'm an experienced human. I'm almost 80 years old, but I still have this childlike openness, and that doesn't have to go away.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't go away, does it? It can be hidden under layers, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still that, innocent, easily amazed creature that we were when we were young. We just sort of lose touch with it, I think. I think the trick is just to get back in touch with that and realize, yes, things are amazing, but also to recognize that there's nothing really wrong with us either. We may think there's stuff wrong with us, and of course we have traumas and beliefs and dysfunctional patterns and whatever else, but underneath all that, we're still that same innocent, easily amazed, lovable creature, like my daughter who comes in at 18. There's no suggestion of having to have good self-esteem or any of that stuff.
Right.
We make that up as we go along, but actually, that beautiful innocence is still in all of us. It's just the degree to which we've lost touch with it, I think.
Well, I think your daughter's fortunate to have you as a father.
That's very kind.
Well, you have this understanding, and that will automatically transfer without any effort on your part.
That's really kind. I appreciate that, Robert. That's a really lovely thing to say.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I meant it.
Thank you. No, that's very sweet. And listen, I'm gonna draw our conversation to a close, but I'd love to do it again sometime. I've really enjoyed talking, Robert. It's been a real pleasure. And I enjoy, obviously, reading your stuff, but actually getting to see you and talk to you has been more enjoyable, even more enjoyable. It's been really, really lovely. So thank you very much indeed for coming on, and we must do it again sometime.
I'm certainly willing to do that. I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Simon. Be well.
Thank you.